Hello and welcome on in to Classic Pro Wrestling with the WFIA podcast. I am Chris DeCarlo, the Vice President of the WFIA. Underneath me is the man with class, Mike the Class DiGregorio from Rhode Island. How are you, sir?
I'm good, everybody. How's everybody doing?
And in the corner to my left, as always, he is not only the player, the producer, the podcast host, the WFIA board member, the one and only Mr. Benny Scala.
And unlike Mr. DiGregorio, I have no class.
And well, guys, this week we are privileged and honored to have underneath Benny our main event guest for this episode. He is known from the WWF, but he is a former NWA Western States Tag Team Champion, a former World Class Wrestling NWA Brass Knucks Champion. He should be in every Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame there is. The one and only Mr. Davey O'Hannon.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Well,
Absolutely.
We appreciate your time, sir, and thank you for being with us this week. We are live on YouTube under the Playa Entertainment Network each and every Thursday night, live at 7:05 Eastern Time. And Benny, where can we listen to us on the radio, sir?
We are on radio WANT. If you want it, they got it.
Awesome. And also within 24 hours, this show will be downloaded, uploaded to Spotify. So, and a special hello to everybody in the chat room. Benny will keep us apprised of that. And first, a little WFIA business, if I can. You go to the WFIA.org. You can buy a t-shirt like behind me. We have coffee mugs for sale. Also, we want everybody to be a WFIA member. $50 for the calendar year gets you a newsletter via email each and every month, a 10% discount on anything you buy in the WFIA.org store. And also, we want to have an in-person convention in 2027 for the 60th anniversary of the WFIA. So I thank you and appreciate that. Mr. O'Hannon, before we get in here, Benny, if you will, please, my video disclaimer. This is under Copyright Law 107, Fair Use. These videos are my personal DVD collection. I do not sell them. I do not rent them. I clip them for the purpose and enjoyment of this show each and every week. We are going to comment on them and for historical reasons to keep classic pro wrestling alive. So with that, Benny, if you could please roll our clip on Mr. O'Hannon.
Absolutely. Here.
Well, Danucci knows all the moves, and a guy who does maintain his bodybuilding efforts, always in shape, and diets well.
Okay, the match is underway. And they're both against the ropes.
Davey O'Hannon, Medicare, and get it right. Get it right, O'Hannon. You people are going to hear this name all over. And this cigar store Indian in the ring. You got to be kidding me, Medicare. You got to be kidding me with this guy.
Well, he's a very popular man.
Popularity don't get the job done, brother. Popularity don't get it done. It's what happened in the ring is what gets it done.
O'Hannon set the lock up with the Polish power. Putski grinding it out a bit now.
You know, I worked with Dr. Jerry Graham. Unfortunately, you know, he wasn't, he was a creep, is what he was. He was a creep, and he did something to me in the ring that I didn't know about. Well, he spit on me from behind.
So some classic clips of your great career, Mr. O'Hannon.
400 years ago. Yeah.
Nah, that would mean I'm old because I remember watching that first match with Bobo Brazil what had happened.
I got to tell you
that was so good. That was really a great match. I watched.
Benny, just to interrupt you, I thought it was a stinker, and I'll tell you why. I was kind of new, so that was the early '70s. I think anyway, and you got to understand that I watched Bobo when I was a kid. Bobo Brazil was a superstar. He was a superstar, and when I got in the ring with him, I was intimidated. I wasn't intimidated that I would get hurt. I was intimidated because it was Bobo. And, I was a heel, of course, and I didn't want to do any of my stuff because it was him. And he actually approached me in the dressing room after the match. And he said to me, "Hey, kid, what happened out there?" He said, "They told me you were okay." I didn't hurt him and I didn't do anything terrible. I said, "Well, I'll tell you what happened. You're Bobo and I'm not." That's what happened. Subsequently, I worked with him. I think I worked with him in Columbus. I think I worked with him in Detroit once or twice. We had great matches. He was one of the easiest guys in the business to work with. He was immense. He had big shoulders, huge legs, but he was what we call light as a feather. He was easy to work with. So you picked out my least favorite match ever.
Well, I loved it, but I believe he was probably in his early 50s by then when that match happened.
Oh, no doubt about it. Yeah, no doubt about it. Listen, this guy, the size of him, he used to drop kick, flying head scissors. He was a flyer, and that was sort of awkward for those old timers back then. In the early '60s, when he was working. So he was a big deal. He was a big deal, and I wasn't. So that was the problem.
Well, we kind of talked off camera, but we're going to bring it up. I mentioned you were Western States Tag Champion and Brass Knuckles Champion. Through our friends at the Savoldi Wrestling Library, you can buy their streaming channel on platforms. They are going to be having some Amarillo footage, Mr. O'Hannon. Ooh. So hopefully we'll get to see you out of that too.
Well, how about that?
Yeah, and I know Benny's got something to say too.
Yeah.
I want to share a clip with Steve Gennarelli has a show called Stick to Wrestling with John McAdam. It's audio only. It pretty much hones in on the WWF in the late 70s, early 80s. It is a great show. Sometimes I do a lot of podcasts, and I always wondered before I did podcasts, like, what does a podcaster listen to? It's my go-to show besides, our own shows, of course. But Steve does a great job. And Steve has a question about Davey having a major bloodbath with Victor Rivera after Victor turned heel.
Yeah, it was a bloodbath. It was in the Nassau Coliseum, and they were just turning Victor to heel. I was already a heel, and I had pretty decent reaction with the people in Nassau. So they said, we want a heel match, except we really got to get Victor over and give him a push with this. So you didn't have blood because you felt like looking good in red that night. It was for business purposes, and you didn't do it without the promoter okaying this kind of stuff. It turns out that that the one with Victor was really a mess. I mean, it was a mess. I think we really wrecked a pair of my pale yellow tights. It was not, yeah.
And the mat, of course.
Well, yeah.
It's really sad because when Spiros Arion, and I remember Spiros Arion when he was a babyface in the late '60s, and he was the number 2 before Chief became number 2 babyface in the early '70s, and ironically, Victor Rivera became the number 2 babyface after that. But when Arion turned heel, I was shocked, but I thought he was an incredibly good heel. Victor, sadly, his heel run was not very good at all, and it was very short
No,
lived.
it flattened out for Victor. For some reason, it didn't work. I don't think his heart was in it. I think he was already looking someplace else. It's when Eddie Einhorn started up north. But Spiros, I got to tell you, he was probably one of the hottest heels I ever saw.
Oh yeah,
It was unbelievable, and the people didn't notice it, but if one of the heels were coming out of the ring and it was a hot one, somebody would stand at the dressing room door and we'd watch just to make sure he got back into the room okay. And more than once I went out for Spiros and got his back to walk up the aisle. I don't remember where it was, but we got almost to the dressing room and some guy puts a cigarette out on his chest.
oh,
Whoa.
Now,
Wow.
if you had to pick somebody on that card to not put a cigarette out on their chest, Spiros might have been right at the top of that list. So when I saw it happen, I went, oh, here we go. And sure enough, Spiros went right into the row, and he got him. He caught the guy, and he snatched him. And, we had as Tony Altamori would say, we had a whole Hey Rube going on. It was crazy.
Wow. Well, I like to always ask, some of our guests that we have, I'm sure you do, either Iron Sheik story or, of course, Andre the Giant story you can share.
Well, like the Sheik and I made one trip to Japan together. And it was actually, I think, it was one of the first trips that Hogan, rest his soul, was making to Japan when he came into New York. And Vince Sr. said to me, listen, he hasn't been there, kind of babysit him. Now Terry was already a good worker. He knew what he was doing. He knew the business. It was really clear he was gonna be the guy that changed the face of the business. But Japan was a different place to work. It wasn't just another territory. And this trip was the first trip over when the United States boycotted the Olympics. So you guys might know the dates. I think it was the early 80s, might have been 1980. I don't know. But pretty much the world was pissed off at us, and our allies also boycotted to support us. So here we go over to Japan, and their Olympic team didn't get to go to the Olympics. So they came to work for Antonio Inoki, a handful of them. And they didn't like us. They already don't like us, but they didn't like us even more. And the very first night, I was in a 6-man tag. It was Hogan, myself, and the Iron Sheik. And I don't remember who the Japanese guys were, but 2 of them were their Olympic wrestlers. And I started the match, and, I was an amateur. I can wrestle, but I was in the wrestling business now. That's what I was doing, business. And I got in the ring, and we started the match, and I kind of opened up for him. And he kicked me so hard. Am I allowed to say nuts on this thing?
Of course.
He kicked me so hard in the nuts that
Wow.
it was unbelievable. Unbelievable. Down I went. I thought I was going to get sick. And I rolled over, and I got a tag. I couldn't even get up. So Hogan took the tag, and I rolled onto the apron, and I was still kind of curled up on the mat, on the apron, and I saw Hogan drag this guy over, and he hit him, I guess, about 5 or 6 shots that were as hard as I've seen anybody get hit. So that was the easy part for the Japanese guy. Then Hogan tagged Koshiro, and Kaz leaned over to me and said, in his squeaky voice, rest his soul, He said, "Now the receipt for you, Davey." And he turned the guy over and posted his head. And if you're on the mat, posting your head means holding it so you can't move. Usually where your head goes, the rest of your body has to follow. But he had this guy's head posted, and the receipt was popped his eye right out. He reached in, and out goes the eye. I'm saying to myself, well, holy shit. I'm not sure I saw that before,
Wow.
And, he got it. It wasn't hanging. He didn't pull it all the way out, but he popped it out of the socket.
Damn.
Needless to say, the next 4 weeks were really easy. Were really easy. So Kaz later said to me, we could do that a couple of nights. No, we don't have to do that a couple of more nights. I got a feeling they got the picture here, and of course, into the office we go the next day, and Inoki, wanted to know what was going on because he didn't see it. So it all settled down. That was a tougher company to work for than Baba. Baba was an easy guy to work for, but that's an Iron Sheik story for you.
Wow. And of course,
You also did 6 Man Navy with Hogan in Morocco, correct?
I'm
In
sorry,
Japan?
Benny. You didn't come
Did
through.
you? I thought you did a couple. You did some 6 mans with Hogan in Morocco.
Oh yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. I guess we were working for Inoki then too. I'm not positive, because I work for both companies. But what we used to do is when they brought you in to Japan initially, it's an extravaganza, and confetti and streamers and in the ring, and they present you flowers and everything. And they had all the guys in the ring. The baby faces were on one side and the heels were on the other side. So on my side was Don Morocco, Sheik probably, Bill Eadie with the hood on, Masked Superstar. I don't know, maybe Danny Miller. I just don't remember who else. But what they also used to do on behalf of the fans, they would have big laundry baskets filled with sponge balls, just nice soft sponge balls, and they'd bring them into the dressing room early, and you'd sign autographs on them, and they would have them in the ring when you came out, so you could toss them to the fans. Okay, well, we're heels, we're just not used to being that nice to the people, but so we're doing that, and on the other side of the ring is Tony Atlas. Again, a bunch of the baby faces, but one of the guys standing there was Karl Gotch. If somebody doesn't know it, Karl Gotch was a killer if you wanted to be, an absolute killer. The guy was unreal. So Tony Atlas is doing his poses for the people, and he's got his back to us, and Morocco says to me, "Let's get Atlas with these balls." So we're tossing these things and trying to hit Tony Atlas with the sponge balls. And I said, well, I got to get a closer shot. So I took 2 steps forward. I took a sponge ball, and I really let it fly. So just as I let it go, it was almost like when Wile E. Coyote is watching that anvil come in slow motion. I let this thing go, and Tony Atlas bends down to pick a ball up that hit him.
Oh, God.
And standing right in front of Tony Atlas is Karl Gotch.
Oh, no.
And the sponge ball hits him right over the eye.
Wow.
And I went, oh, my God. I could feel myself get all flushed. And I heard somebody, which I found out was my pal Don Morocco, said, "You better go right to the airport, brother." And I turned around, and I was the only one standing there. I was the only one left in the ring. They all hopped out, and they were throwing the balls to the fans. and here's me, and Carl Gotch is doing like a laser through my head. And I'm saying, oh boy, this is going to be a really, really interesting next 3 weeks. If something, I don't know what's going to happen here. So we go back to Tokyo into the hotel, and I get up in the morning. They had a great breakfast buffet. So I go down before we go on the road, and I walk around these ornamental plants and everything. And as I come around the corner, Carl Gotch is sitting right at the table. How am I going to explain to my wife that I died at the breakfast buffet in Tokyo?
Yeah, what a way to go.
Yeah, what's going to happen here? And Carl, I walked over to him. I said, Mr. Gotch, I just want you to know that was an accident. There was no disrespect intended. And in that really great Nazi stormtrooper accent of his, he said, you could have taken my eye out. Oh boy.
No.
I'm sorry. But a few nights before, when I first got into Japan, and they picked me up in the hotel lobby, there was a little bar. Actually, it was a sushi place and it had a bar. And I looked in, and a couple of the guys were sitting there, and Carl Gotch was there. So I sat at the table. We were all having some beer. And when it was done, I picked up the check for the 4 other guys that were there, which turns out to be an anomaly in the professional wrestling business. I learned not to do that too often. But Carl took me outside later and said, you seem like a nice boy. Find out or watch and see how many of your friends pick up the check. He said, I appreciate it. Don't do it anymore. So that check might have saved me. But
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Wow. And of course, we've heard from another great wrestler, Mr. Johnny Rods, about driving Andre the Giant around. I'm sure you have an Andre the Giant story at least.
Listen, Johnny knows everybody in the business. Johnny knows everybody. Johnny's a very, very close friend for many, many years. But I watched Johnny when I was a wrestling fan on Channel 5 with Ray Morgan, and because that's how I started doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's when I made my mind up that I wanted to do this for a living. So Johnny could tell you stories forever.
Yes.
I used to tell him, Johnny, I was on the phone with you. You gave me a cauliflower ear, man. It just didn't stop. But Johnny has worked with everybody. He was sort of the test pattern for Vince McMahon. When somebody came into the territory and they wanted to know if this guy was New York worthy, Johnny was the guy. Johnny was the guy. And he was one of the best there was. And unfortunately, New York, Johnny probably could have easily been an NWA champ. Easily. But New York, you see, they really didn't have to try too hard in New York because of such a big population. They had such a big population. They could put, if they had Bruno or Hogan or, whoever it might have been, they didn't worry too much. So they didn't tell a story on TV like they did in the NWA territories. NWA territories built it from week to week to week to week. New York was one of the only places I ever really saw squash jobs. I never saw that. And the thinking is, if you're a top guy and you glom somebody and squash them in 1 minute, well, who did you beat? It means nothing. It means nothing. And some of the top guys appreciated that. You got a guy like Pedro, who really hated when that happened. Pedro was a good champ, and a fiery guy, but he wanted somebody to wrestle with him and fight with him, so he looked like the champion. And I saw Pedro more than once get disgusted in the ring. And what happens then is, if the guy is about to be disrespected with the squash, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. I mean, I knew my place in the business very well. I was, I did okay in some spots. Luckily, I never got involved in one of those squashes when I worked in New York. But I used to tell a new guy, listen, if you don't know how to throw a punch, don't throw it. Because if it looks really crappy, I'm going to react to it. And if you're going to hit me, I don't want you to knock my teeth out, but if you're going to put one on my chest or my back, and if you can't take that, then you shouldn't be here.
Right.
But if you hit me and you make it look really bad, I'm going to hit you back, and I'm going to hit you back and hurt you. So do you have a little wrestling background? That's how we can get started. Let's do that. So New York was different than any place else.
Benny, you were going to mention, we talked off camera about when we talked about in the Amarillo territory.
Well, I was going to say, back in the 80s, I worked for Citibank, and I carpooled. I lived in Patchogue, Long Island. I worked in Huntington. Davey's probably familiar with the area. So I had a bunch of buddies, workmates that lived out east by me, and we would carpool, 27 miles, but, saving on gas. Davey carpooled, but it was instead of 27 miles, it was like 700 miles. So what kind of, you had some long trips there.
Well, we started our week on a Thursday, which was the big show in Amarillo. So it's easier to put it together and understand it like that. So Thursday was Amarillo. You got to stay in your hotel Thursday night because that's basically where you lived. The next day, Friday night, was Lubbock. Lubbock was about 130 from Amarillo, so that's 260 round trip. That was like a night off. So you went to Lubbock. You worked there. It's a great town, run by a guy, Nick Roberts. And Nicola Roberts is his daughter. I see her.
Baby doll. Yeah.
Yeah. So Lubbock was a great town. The fans were, don't forget the fans. It was personal to them in these little territories. So anyway, Lubbock, you got to come back and stay in your hotel again. Saturday morning at 9:00, you got to go to the TV station in Amarillo and do live promos and live show. You had however many matches they had, 4 or 5 in a TV studio. It might have been 50 or 60 people there, and they do camera angles, so it looks like more. So after TV, you either went to where this poster is, which was close by, a place called the Hereford Bull Barn in Hereford, Texas. Little local place, was there forever. Or you got in a car and you went to either Pueblo, Colorado Springs, or Boulder, Colorado. That was a long ride. So you went up there. Usually that was a big show, so I got to go up there a lot. When you were finished in Colorado Springs, you stopped at a place where you used to buy some sandwiches and beer, and you headed for Albuquerque. So there you were, headed south to Albuquerque, another almost 300 to Albuquerque.
Wow.
You pulled into Albuquerque, 3 or 4, whatever time it was, I don't remember. In the morning, you checked into the hotel, but you had to be up at TV studio at 10:00 in the morning for live promos for the Albuquerque show that night. It was early. I think the show started at 6. So we were doing live promos. The promoter was an old-time worker named Mike London, gnarly old guy. When I first met him, of course I was a heel, so I went to take the microphone out of his hand, and he slugged me. I said, oh, okay, here we go. I have to beat up the promoter now. So we we would do the promos for the Albuquerque show. Back to the hotel. You got to sleep a little bit. There was also a pretty good, I think it was a Quality Inn that had a nice brunch buffet. We'd go there, go to sleep for a while. If it was good weather, you'd lay out in the sun by the pool, and then do the show in Albuquerque. As soon as you were done showing Albuquerque in the car, then you'd head for San Angelo, Texas. You'd do San Angelo. Sometimes you had to go to San Antonio, not too often. And I don't recall the next two. It was either Abilene and Odessa or Odessa and Abilene. So you hit those two. You were staying over every night. You're in a hotel. You'd finish up in Abilene or Odessa in the car, another 4-hour trip back to Amarillo. Get to your hotel whatever time. Up in the morning, do some laundry, get the car serviced, do all of that kind of stuff, and start all over again.
Wow.
They were big.
Unreal.
So that was tough. That was tough. In Amarillo, I traveled mostly with my tag team partner because we were a team, so we were everywhere together. It was Dennis Stamp. Dennis Stamp was a great guy, and we traveled. And we did. Terry Funk was in and out. The Funks owned the territory, so for me it was a treat. I got to work with Terry Funk. I worked with Dory Funk Jr., Ricky Romero, who was a superstar in the Southwest. Superstar, well before I got into business. Reggie Parks, who was one of the first models for Superman magazine. Reggie Parks was a great guy. And they would bring people in to work with you. I worked with Bob Geigel from Kansas City. I got to work with Red Bastien. That was, for me, I watched the Flying Bastien brothers in New York TV. So, I was lucky because I got in the business while a lot of the guys that I used to watch on television or go see in the local arenas were still in the business. So I got to work with them.
That's awesome. And a question for you is like, we always talk about different ring announcers, managers, whatever have you, a ton of stories, I'm sure, between Joe McHugh and Howard Finkel.
Oh, wow. Well, Joe McHugh, you know what? They were both huge personalities. Howard was lucky enough to have the Garden and those big buildings on the coast there. Joe McHugh, before Howard got the exposure on cable, when all that stuff started to happen, everybody knew Joe McHugh. Yeah, he was great, and they were both really great guys. Howard treated me fantastic. I got a call a long time ago from Howard, and we had been out of touch, and he said, Davey, he said, we're doing this is, I guess it was the WWE at the time, I think. He said, listen, we're doing a special called the something about it was the arse-kicking Irish superstars of the WWF. So he says to me, we're doing a special about the Irish superstars of the WWF. Of course, I said to him, what are you calling me for? I'm not one of the Irish superstars. No. He went, oh, no, wait a minute. You got some history there. He said, do you mind if I make you a part of this? Do I mind? Are you nuts? Of course I don't mind. So Howard thought of me, and they did this thing with myself and Irish Pat Barrett. I watched Pat Barrett again as a kid, and I got to work with him, and I got to travel together with him. So Howard treated me very well. We were pretty good friends. They were both stars in their own right but it was a different world for each of them.
And of course, Mr. Gary Michael Capetta did All-Star Wrestling, and then he
one of the best.
Philadelphia Spectrum.
Yeah, Gary was absolutely one of the best. He really was. I mean, I saw a whole lot of different announcers, and I would put Gary right up on top there, right up on top. Mike Cicluna used to love to have Gary in the ring because he would take his cape and wave it over Gary's head. Yeah, it was great. Yeah, Gary was a star. He really was.
You know, somebody, Benny, we don't mention, and of course, what a character he played was George the Animal Steel, Mr. O'Hannon. I'm sure you have a story about him.
Well, you know what? I met George when I was a fan. So I think it was 1964 or 1965. I'm not positive. But I used to be able to go to the wrestling shows in the Asbury Park Convention Hall down at the Jersey Shore. And it was a time when your parents could take you someplace and let you go with a friend, a cousin, or whatever. So anyway, my father worked at night. He was in the newspaper business. But my mom and my aunt would drive down to Asbury Park, and a friend and I would go to the wrestling show, and my mother would go to the other end of the boardwalk to a movie. And, we'd meet there. And George Steele, of course, was wrestling at the time. And when we walked out, George Steele was sitting at a place that's still in Asbury Park and has pretty good cheesesteaks, by the way, called the Wonder Bar, right across from the Asbury Park Convention Hall, a block down from the Stone Pony. Springsteen drops into both places all the time. Anyway, so George Steele is sitting outside having a cheesesteak and a beer, and I said to my mother or my aunt, I said, "Oh my God, that's George Steele." So my aunt says, "Well, why don't you get his autograph?" I said, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that." So we walk over, and my aunt walks over and says, "Excuse me, my nephew wants to be a wrestler when he grows up." So George leaned over and said, "Come over here, you." He said, "Yeah." And he looks at my mother and says, "Tell you what, send him," exact words, "you send him up to a little green and white splash called Michigan State to go to college. And when he's done with college, then see me and I'll help him be a professional wrestler." He said, "And if he gives you any trouble, look me up and I'll put my foot right up his ass." And I'm standing there. So I get in the business, and eventually, of course, I have contact with George, and we're friends. And I said, "I got to ask you if you remember something." "What?" And I tell him the story. And my mom passed away when she was 42 years old from cancer. He said, "Do I remember?" He said, "I'll describe your mother to you." And he did, to a T. He said, short, dark hair, all that stuff. That my mother had dark hair. That was the Italian side of the family, Benny, the Carusos.
Caruso.
Bruno used to say that it's the only good part of you. But So I got to be friends with George, and he remembered it. We were at an affair. I think it was one of the original Hall of Fame up in Amsterdam get-togethers. I found the program from that night. And don't forget, I didn't get an autograph. So I had it framed. We framed it, and I wrote him a nice card. And George and his wife, well, I don't know if his wife was there, but George was there, my wife was there, and, a couple of my kids. And, in a second or two, George and I are all teary about this, talking about it. So George and I became very close friends. And I actually spoke to him the day before he passed away.
Wow.
Yeah, I said to him, he was really sick at the end. It was really hard. I was having trouble hearing him. And I said, you know what? I said, I wish I could come down and just give you a hug. And he said, you just did. You just,
That's really nice.
and then that was it. And my wife and I were in a car on our way from the Jersey Shore to Philadelphia. And my daughter called, and my wife said, Amanda just called and said George is gone. So I got to, like I said, be very close, personal friends with these guys that I watched and I became co-workers with, and so many of them that I miss.
Wow. Yeah. Unfortunately, they're gone before our time. There, another comment there, Benny.
Yeah, we got a question from Steve Generelli. Can you tell us about The Boys Are Back, and will that ever show on YouTube?
Yeah, you know what? I don't know. I don't even have a copy of it. I'm not sure I've even seen a finished product. I do remember doing it. Bruno was involved, and he called and said, "Listen, we're putting something together. Would you be interested?" Well, I said, "Sure." So, if I recall, it was, of course, Bruno, Nikolai Volkov, Dominic was there, Ivan Koloff, Pedro Morales, and I think Stan Stasiak's son was there. But we shot a thing, and it was sort of kind of, I think, and I could be wrong. It was like a comparison between our time and the current, and it was sort of like an argument back and forth across the table. They had some of the newer guys, but like I said, I never did see a finished product of it. I do remember shooting it, and it was kind of neat. We did it up in Westchester County in New York, and it was fun. It was fun.
Well, I got a question for you, Mr. O'Hannon. Of course, you've been in a lot of arenas.
Mr. O'Hannon, one more time.
I know. I'm sorry, Davey.
Plain old Davey. That's it.
Just force a habit.
Okay, break that habit.
Yeah, Davey. Many arenas you've been throughout the country, but I want to concentrate on which one did you like? Of course, MSG, Philly, or Boston.
Ooh, the Spectrum was a great place. The Spectrum was a great place. We called an easy crowd. You really had to protect yourself at the Spectrum, because walking out, you were getting punches tossed at you. The Boston Garden was a good place, but it got a little dangerous. They had to put some nets up on top because the people were throwing flashlight batteries. I wasn't involved, but that's where Freddie Blassie lost an eye. Somebody threw an egg, hit Freddie in the eye in the ring, and the shell cut his nerve, and Freddie lost an eye. The Garden was always special because it was the Garden, and while I loved working at the Garden, and it was the ultimate thrill for me, because I went to the old Garden, of course, to see wrestling. The Garden was a thrill, but the Spectrum was a good place. My wife's family and my wife were all from Philadelphia. So maybe that made it a little more special. I got to bring some people with me. We had I don't know who I was working with, but the newspapers used to cover wrestling, quite a bit. And we had a big show in the Spectrum, and one of the photographers caught me with a reverse headlock on a guy, and I was making some kind of weird face. And the Philadelphia News put the picture in the sports section the next day, except the caption said, Davey O'Hannon was asked to imitate his mother-in-law.
Oh, my God.
So I had to go pick up my wife at her parents' house. And my father-in-law, and incidentally, my in-laws were the most wonderful people in the world. They were great. They were great. My father-in-law comes to the door, and he's got the Philadelphia Daily News in his hand.
Uh-oh.
He says, "You're in a lot of trouble, pal." Why am I? I didn't see it. Why am I in a lot of trouble? So I opened the paper and I went, "That's why." So maybe, maybe that personal connection for me. But I liked a lot of the smaller arenas. I had a really, really good reaction in New Haven, in the New Haven Coliseum. So when I say a good reaction, sometimes it was a little dangerous. And the Sunnyside Garden was a great place. It was a little old arena that had a lot of character.
Yes.
And I actually was involved in my first little riot in the Sunnyside Garden. I was working with Kevin Sullivan when he first came in as a babyface. And Kevin and I were working, and I was doing my heel stuff. And, suddenly I felt some punches in my face, and I realized Kevin's hands were down next to his sides. And I know I didn't punch myself in the face. So I looked up, and there was a guy standing on the second turnbuckle holding onto the ring post, throwing punches at me. We were in the corner. And he landed a few, but, he had to hold on to the ring post. And he was probably holding on with his left hand. And I got maybe one of the best shots I ever gave somebody on his face with my right hand. And I really drilled him, and he went flying off the ring post and splattered on the floor, of course. But the problem was all those people that were coming in the ring after me. And I heard somebody say, "Get him." So the first thing you think about, are you going to get cut? You got to worry about that. So I hopped out and I fought my way up the aisle. I got a chair and I put it on my head because that was the old wooden chairs that were loose. They were flying all over. And I got up the aisle and I looked up, and it was the wrong aisle. I fought my way up to the concession stand.
Uh-oh.
That was a problem, but Kevin knew what to do. What did the people want most? They wanted Kevin to kick my ass all over that arena. So I looked up, and Kevin was saying, "Let me get him." And I was never so glad to see somebody. So Kevin would turn me around, hit me one or kick me, and I'd take a look and roll the right way. And, eventually I got close to the dressing room. Somebody reached out and kind of dragged me in. But I like the Sunnyside Garden in spite of that.
Wow. Well, before we end this great show with Davey, Benny, if you will, please put up my ECMC still pick.
I have to say one quick thing though,
Sure.
because somebody in the chat room was asking what Davey thought of today's product versus his, and I want to go back to a comment that I've heard Davey say a couple of times, and he said you always say, Davey, that they believed, meaning the fans, they believed because we believe, meaning the wrestlers, and that doesn't exist anymore. So I wanted maybe you to comment on that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We believed in what we were doing because we wanted the fans to believe. So there was no room for what we called a cartoon in the ring. Never, ever. I even see, and this isn't a knock. Listen, these guys now are absolutely phenomenal athletes. Phenomenal. They're great athletes. I would venture to say they're better athletes than we were. Not wrestlers, but better athletes than we were. But I see some independent guys who are great athletes as well. The first thing they do is hop in a ring, hop in the second rope, and they're playing with the fans. Sometimes there's only 25 fans in this thing. Then they'll do what we used to call high spots for 10 minutes. They mean nothing. They mean nothing. They would do finishes that we would do once. Well, why once? Because if I gave you a neck breaker, you were supposed to be out enough for me to beat you and believe that my neck breaker hurt.
Right.
Okay? They all do this Ric Flair chop. I mean, you're going to stand in a ring and you're supposed to be in a fight, by the way. You're supposed to be in a fight. And a promoter in St. Louis called Sam Muchnick said, let's explain something here. You're a professional athlete. You're in the ring to win an athletic contest. That's what you're there to do. You're not there to get disqualified. You're not there to argue with the fans. You're not there to pose for them. You're there to wrestle and win. So if somebody slaps me on the chest and then I slap him back, and then he slaps me on the chest and I slap him back, like after the second slap, what's this all about? I know if somebody slaps me, I'm not going to slap them back. We're going to have a problem. We're going to have a problem. So the difference is that they're not trying to sell their product to convince the people that they are wrestlers. And they're not trying to convince the people of a story they're trying to tell. We were. If I was working with somebody, I didn't stop beating them up to go argue with a fan. If that happened out in the street, I'd get killed. You don't do that. So that's the difference. That's the difference. What happened was was it Shakespeare that said, when you take the intrigue out of the play, you take the play away. You take the play away. When you take the mystery out of it, then it's gone. Then it's gone. If we made the fans believe, or we tried to, and we gave them an opportunity to suspend their disbelief for a couple of hours. And they would go home and say, did you see Bruno? Did you see Mike Ciclone? Did you see Johnny Rods come off those ropes and kick him in the head? That's what the people remembered. See what they remember from 7 matches, everybody doing the same thing. I don't watch it now. I couldn't tell you what was going on with any of the big companies. I don't watch it. Somebody said, do you know anybody? I know some of the kids or the grandkids. I wrestled The Rock's grandfather. I worked with Dusty. I know Cody, or knew Cody. I met him, and we talked, and he said, oh, yeah, you work with my dad? Yes, I did. Yes, I did. But I don't know anything about what's going on now. I met Roman Reigns. Joey was his name. He's a wonderful kid. He really is a wonderful guy, a well-spoken, respectful guy. And I met him at a WrestleMania, the WrestleMania and the Hall of Fame for the WWF that Bruno got inducted. And at a table with myself, Dominic, Ivan Koloff, Afa, and Sika. And Joey is Sika's son. And I said, Joey, I got to tell you something. You guys are better than we ever were. And Sika said, oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Oh, no, they're not. But anyway, that's the difference. We were in the wrestling business. We weren't in the entertainment business. It's simple as that for us old guys.
I got to tell you, Davey, I guess it was probably the late 70s. HBO started showing garden cards on cable, so we could watch them, New York cable, Long Island Cablevision. We could pick up the garden cards. And I got to tell you that a Davey O'Hannon, Manny Soto match, like a 20-minute draw, it was better than 99.9% of what you could watch on TV today. And it didn't matter that it wasn't the main event. We didn't care. Every match to us was important, and it was great. And they were just like, it was Johnny versus Dominic, SD versus Cicluna, you versus Manny. It was nonstop, and it was such good therapy for whatever else, no matter what else was going on in your life. You had your parents were on your case. You had a problem with the job. You weren't doing good in school. Your girlfriend was cheating on you. You always had wrestling to make everything better. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I'm really flattered. We just never shortchanged the people. They paid money for a ticket. And before we close, can I do a little plug?
Of course.
On September 20th, Johnny Rods and I are going to support a charity called Wrestle and Recovery. And we're going to be at the College of New Jersey, September 20th. And it's a good organization. It helps treatment for addiction and for all different things. And on October 12th, Johnny Rodz, the one and only unpredictable Johnny Rodz, is being inducted into the International Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame up in Albany, and I'm getting to do the induction for him.
That is
So,
very
Oh, that's great.
March around, come and see us.
Awesome, definitely. Before we do close here, Davey, Benny, if you will, still put up my ECMC still pick. Again, each and every week we will mention this until our friend Mrs. Robin Restino gets her kidney that she desperately needs. This is ECMC transplant in Western New York. I'm in Niagara Falls. This is about Buffalo, New York area. 716-898-5001 is the phone number. Available blood types are A negative, A positive, and O. And hopefully someday soon, somebody will help our good friend Mrs. Robin Restino get her kidney.
Amen.
Second, Benny, if you will, Mike DeClass, our independent wrestler of the week.
Sure. This week's Indie Wrestler of the Week is Myron Reed, and he is the current champion of, I believe it's Game Changer Wrestling. And yeah, he's middleweight. He's had some time in TNA, which I guess is now owned by WWE. So, yep, our Indie Wrestler of the Week is Myron Reed.
Awesome. And if you and Benny continue with our military salute of the week, salute to service.
Sure. This week's salute to service is to Conan, whose real name is Charles Ashenoff. He did spend some time in the U.S. Navy on the battleship. I believe it was the USS Cape Cod.
Wow.
And he also was in Beirut during that time, in I believe it was the late 70s when the barracks were bombed there. So,
Wow.
yeah.
You
So
see,
he had.
each and every different week, we're going to have a military salute to service. And you never know until you spotlight it here, Mike. So awesome. That is great.
Absolutely.
And Benny, lastly, my PSA of the week, please, is the National Federation of the Blind. Obviously, we change it up each and every week, and go to their website or just put in on your search National Federation of the Blind, and hopefully by now I would think there'd be some technology, Benny, to try and help these people see somehow, somewhat, but
Yeah.
We want to encourage people to go and donate to that great cause if you can. And lastly, Mr. O'Hannon, Davey, we appreciate the time. We appreciate you being here with us this week. And it was awesome to meet you. And we'll have you back on in the near future, hopefully.
Well, the pleasure was mine. I'm flattered and humbled that you would consider having me here. And thanks to all the fans, all those years that threw things at me and booed me. We got the job done.
I only booed you, Davey. I never threw anything.
Thank you, Benny. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, guys, again, we thank Davey O'Hannon for being our special guest this week. And next week, we will have our first former female pro wrestler, Princess Victoria, will join us live next week right here.
Wow.
Thursday
Very
night,
nice that one,
September
yeah.
4th, 7:05 on the Playa Entertainment Network here on YouTube. So thank you to everybody. Take care. Have a safe,
care, guys.
enjoy your Labor Day weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Davey.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.